My name is Francis H. Clifton. I was born February the 24th, 1920 in Grapevine, Arkansas, which is in Grant County, south central part of Arkansas, about 50 miles south of Little Rock, 20 miles west of Pine Bluff. My folks have been in Arkansas for 2 or 3 generations. We're very native out there, rural area. Born in my grandmother's house. I guess they had a doctor in attendance, but I never had a birth certificate issued, which I found out when I tried to get into the Navy. My dad farmed a little. We talking about one time. We was talking about when he's trying to help us with school lessons. Asked him, how far did you go in school? He said, I don't know. They didn't have grades then. It was a one-room schoolhouse, and the boys went to school till they got big enough to go to work, and they got out and went to work. Farming, logging, a few things, whatever rural areas do. But later on, he went to work with Southwestern Bell Telephone Company as lineman, repairman. We lived over southeast Arkansas, Daremont, Lake Village, McGee. And I first became aware of the world in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And started the grammar school there in Pine Bluff at Sam Taylor Grammar School. And like I say, about 1932, 12 years old, I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, younger than I by that time. The telephone man in Monticello, Arkansas was electrocuted on the job, and my dad was sent down there as a replacement. I guess it might say the turning point of our lives, because Arkansas A&M was located in Monticello, and finished high school right on into A&M, just a daily commute, just like extending high school. But the reason I say that, that's the only place we could have ever went to college, because they couldn't afford any board and all the rest of it. So.
What did you study there?
I got a degree in botany with a minor in mathematics. Graduated in 1941.
Why did you study botany?
Well, just kind of liked it. A lot of plants around, you might say.
The timber industry was important in
Oh
that
yeah,
area.
there was a lot. Crossett Lumber Company was a dominant outfit there. They owned about 500,000 acres of timberland. We were in the timber business in all ways. Sawmill, paper mill, chemical plants, everything else. So it was a very prominent business around there. And actually, in high school, I tried to figure out a way to get to LSU for forestry, but like I say, no way. So I went to A&M there. Forestry and botany. I think the only forestry course A&M had was a little farm forestry in their agricultural program. So actually, it was an agricultural class.
What kind of work did you envision after going through the school?
Well, at that time, most of it was National Forest Service and National Forest work in the National Forest. There wasn't too many commercial foresters. Crossett had a few, and some of the other mills had a few, but mainly it was U.S. Forest Service.
Okay.
Well, after school, got a job went out to Dallas, Texas, got a job with National Geophysical Company, which was a contract seismograph outfit. I believe they contracted the Atlantic Oil Company for seismic work over the South. First went to Rosenberg, Texas.
Now explain seismic work. What were you doing?
Seismic work, we were looking for oil there. Seismic can't show the oil, but it shows the subsurface contours and locates oil-bearing strata that they have to drill down to see if there's oil there. But they take these seismic pictures and they can tell where there's rise and dips and all like that, where it might be oil pockets. No. So it was about, I guess, about a 10-man crew. He had a survey. I was rodman on survey party. He had to locate where he's going to put those shot points, they called them, where they put the dynamite down in the ground, shot it off, and the seismograph took the pictures. And so they had 2 or 3 in the survey party. Then they had the seismograph crew truck. They had 3 or 4 on it. And you had the driller and his helper shooting the dynamite truck. So we were down to Rosenberg, that's about 40 miles west of Houston, I believe it is, Fort Bend County. While I was there at Rosenberg, had to register for the draft over at Richmond, was county seat of Fort Bend County. I requested that they send my registration back to Monticello, Arkansas, Drew County, Arkansas, for the draft purposes. Like I said before, I was afraid those guys out in Texas would jerk me up and send me off and leave the home folks home. So, but I found out the home folks in Arkansas didn't treat me much better. Shortly thereafter, I was over and we'd been moved over to Wiggins, Mississippi there. I guess this is about August or something other like that. I'd registered on July the 1st. In August, I got a card saying I was in classified 1A in the draft, which meant you was eligible to be drafted. So that doesn't bother me, that's normal. But just a short time after that, I got orders to report to Little Rock for a physical for induction. So I've forgotten what the future date. Give you about a month to get ready. Instead of going back to Little Rock, I rushed down to New Orleans to the Navy recruiting station and signed up for the Naval Aviation Cadet Program to be getting the flying part of it.
Why did you want to get into flying?
Well, let's say adventure. Better than the Army. It's better than the Army. While I was in college, they had a CPT training, which is Civilian Pilot Training Corps that Roosevelt had insisted got passed to train pilots before the war. This is summer 1940. It was a 3-way deal. The government paid for it. A private flying service instructed the flying, and the college did the ground school and then ground school instruction and administration of the program. But it didn't cost us a dime. It's there, let's get it. Of course, the Navy was trying to recruit people there. Through those times, they'd send a recruiting party through to the colleges, put on their program and all like that. The Navy Aviation Cadet Program, they put on their program there. At that time, the qualifications were minimum age of 20 years, 2 years college, and not married. Of course, being perfect physical health, as you might say. Well, that was just something in the back of your mind. That's, the big boys do that. We're not quite up to that right now, but when the draft got hot and heavy behind your back, you remember that and say, well, let's try that. I know I can fly an airplane a little, so maybe they can teach you more. So, about when went down to New Orleans, got started, signed everything they stuck in front of you, sign. You start getting all the papers ready, and then here comes the no birth certificate. So that caused delays. You had to get your college credits and letters of recommendation. By that time, we moved up to Jonesville, Louisiana, and made a trip to New Orleans from Jonesville. Later on, we moved over to Bunkie, Louisiana, which is right south of Alexandria. We were at Bunkie on December the 7th. And yes, the other day what my reaction was, which was more or less, well, I'm already in the Navy, what can I do about it? Some of the others were pretty excited about what they were going to do. We got up next Monday morning, we was working out around Camp Polk or Camp Claiborne, I don't forget which one we was working at. Army personnel, big trucks, looked like going every direction from the bases. We finally got to a little country filling station and heard Roosevelt make his day of infamy speech. Well, I'd already told the company I was going to quit, that not going to come back after the Christmas holidays. I'd work up to Christmas and then that would end of it. So I went on back to Monticello, folks' house, Christmas. And about the 1st of March, got all my papers ready and everything, and went down to New Orleans, had the final physical. They said, okay, you're all set. Just go back home, we'll call you. I no more got back home, and then got a letter, a telegram, I've forgotten what it was. I can't find it, I don't know what happened to it. Report March 12th, 1942, to New Orleans E-Base. E-Base is an elimination base. You get very minimum flight instructions, I think 40, 50 hours, but they so low you ain't let you fly a plane around for yourself, and it's strictly E-Base. They try to eliminate the undesirables or the ones that no physical coordination to fly a plane. I think, let's see, we went in as seaman seconds with a base pay of $36 a month. At the first month we were strictly in ground school. In the first month we started flight training. And flight pay is 50% of your base pay. So $36 plus 18 is $54 a month we got this for the second and third month. You're about to wind up in New Orleans E-Base, then the question becomes, do you go to Pensacola or Corpus, which is the main training base for the Navy at that time? Well, we went to Pensacola. Some of them went, other classes went to Corpus Christi. They're taking them in every 2 weeks, a class every 2 weeks in New Orleans. We were 3A 42, the first class of March in 42. Went over to Pensacola as class 6A 42. First, and they speeded up their training program. 6A class meshed into the 4C class, which meant we picked up about 5 or 6 weeks on their ground school and other odds and ends trainings before.
Well, we've covered a lot of this. Do you want to kind of summarize your 2 trips to the Pacific? And
Well, let's let the other take care of that. I'll just say, got the wings, spent 2.5 years out in the Pacific and all. Ended up in Jacksonville as a full lieutenant. Base pay there was $200. Had 1 PIP, which was credit for 3 years there. And sea duty pay plus flight pay, I was drawing $330 a month in my pocket there, which was a lot of money at that time. Well, released from the Navy, as soon as I could get out, I didn't have quite enough points to get out the first go around. I think I qualified for inactive duty on the second go around points. I forgot how many I had. But I got out of the Navy on November 11th, I think it was.
You didn't consider staying in with all that money?
Not a bit.
Didn't
It
want
was
to...
a lot of money, but didn't like that way. So I went back Monticello, folks' house. See, I was nearly 26 years old in 1945. Nearly 26 years old. And of course, everybody glad to see you, you know, everything like that. In big time, I had money in the bank, had a car, and you could really live. And every few days, a new guy would be coming home, and some of your friends, college friends, or high school friends, or local friends, they'd be coming home from all over the world, this and that and that. And of course, after you'd been there a while, people begin to ask, well, what are you going to do now? I didn't know, didn't have the slightest idea. Living it up and didn't much care. My folks lived in a small southern town with a courthouse square in the middle, and we lived about a half a block off the square, nearly up in town, up on the square. Sitting there on the front porch one day reading the paper, and the old college professor, botany college professor, was walking down the sidewalk, and I got up to go talk to him. Saw him coming, we walked on out there the sidewalk to talk with him. His name was Dr. Delcy Dembery. He was one of those unforgettable characters you read about in Reader's Digest. He didn't own a car. I don't know whether he could drive a car even. I never saw him drive a car. 4 years I was out there working in his classes. But he could walk about 6 or 8 miles an hour out through the woods or brush on a field trip. He liked to catch snakes. And one day a pygmy rattler got him on the finger. Got him on the finger. I don't think he even put a bandage on it. Just nothing to it. About 2 days later, his arm looked like a well done hot dog. Just swollen. A couple of 3 days later, he's back to normal. I think at one time he did have it in a sling for a day or so. But less than a week, he was back to normal, and so that's the kind of guy he was. But anyway, he asked me, said, hey, well, what are you going to do now? I said, well, I don't know. Might check into LSU and see about a forestry program down there. They had a undergraduate program at LSU. He said, well, I think you're qualified to go to Yale School of Forestry. I said, we got a new guy just come up from LSU, young guy just come up from LSU. He's going to set up a forestry school out here at A&M. But he hasn't got started yet, but as soon as we can get some students, we're going to have a forestry class. So he's a Yale graduate. Go out and talk to him. So I went out and see him, and his name was Hank Chamberlain. He established that school. I stayed there about 40 years. Got the building named after him, and all like that. He got it out the Yale School of Forestry catalog. Said, well, yep, you got this. Yep, you got this. Yep. Hey, you're qualified. Why don't you apply? So I applied. They was accepted. Report March of '46. So they give me a couple months to play around with. Went up to Yale Forest School of Forestry. well known over the world, better than the United States, you might say. No, not many people know there was a forestry school there, but I think 2000 they're going to celebrate their centennial for the school. You know, School of Forestry is a self-contained unit, you might say, up there, about 100 students with instructors. Practically no connection with the university at all as far as, you know, daily contact with. Only most of those 100 people were right out of the service, like me, from practically all over the world. Scotchmen, 2 or 3 Chinamen, 2 or 3 Indians, South African, Australian, 2 or 3 Canadians, like that. So pretty good cross section.
Talk about the studies at the school, the range of things that you learned about.
Well, they had two, at that time they had 2 programs, which was forest management, growing trees, logging them, and getting them to the mill. The other study was wood products. That took the wood from the mills for utilization. What was the best way to use it? That went into all the plywoods and all this and that. And one of the guys said, well, I know about woods, and I had to go back to school to get a degree in chemistry to carry on from what I know about the woods. But I was interested in the management part of it, is growing trees out in the woods. And your silviculture is growing trees, and you had dendrology, recognizing trees. Your forest management is how best to grow them, like that. It was just a farm class on how to grow trees and how to get them logged, cut down, how to measure the product, what you're going to get out of it, what's the best use for the tree in the woods. So that was the course I took.
How long was that program?
Well, I didn't have any forestry in undergraduate, so my course was 2 years. If you had a degree in forestry from a recognized school, LSU or Purdue, I think had one in out west, Washington State, Oregon. If you went from a forestry school, I had a forestry department. With forestry degree, it took 1 year, but my course was 2 years, which was most of the case, because at that time they didn't know, you know, how many students were coming or anything, so they, I guess, took the first applicant that fit, and in fact they started a new semester there in the middle of March to take care of the people that was getting out of the service. Yeah. So we had several, 2 or 3 of my friends never had college in forestry, but one of the qualifications was to have a botany degree, so they would mesh with forestry. About the only connection we had with Yale was we ate in the cafeteria. In the cafeteria, I think, had a bunch of freshmen and graduate students and all like that. But it's always interesting about those freshmen there. Of course, we usually sat together, but every once in a while you'd get a table with some freshmen. And Monday and Tuesday, they talked about what they did over the weekend. Wednesday was kind of quiet. Thursday and Friday, they talked about what they was going to do the next week. So that's about the main contact we had with Yale University.
And you graduated in '48 then?
Yeah.
And where did you go from there? Did you have anything lined up?
Well, let me tell you one story before we get to graduation. You won't believe it, but give me the odds on it. Like I say, it didn't have anything to do with university. We had about 100 men up in the forestry school, and everybody knew each other pretty well. 100 you could know. I knew one man, undergraduate class. His name was Slim Hallis. He was Navy, aviation chief radioman, and he flew with my flight crew with me in Inuiatok in 1944. And I ran into him on the streets of New Haven, and he was the only undergraduate man I knew in the whole Yale College. So I don't know what your odds are on that.
Yeah.
And of course there's another undergraduate going to graduate in 48 that I didn't know anything about at the time. Of course, I'm talking about the future president, George Bush.
Yeah, he was a veteran too, wasn't he?
Yeah. And after he got to be president, I got some good stories on him with parallel to my career. He was a Navy pilot, World War II out in the Pacific. I was a Navy pilot, World War II out in the Pacific. After the war was over, George Bush went up to Yale University. After the war was over, I went to Yale University. George Bush graduated in 1948 from Yale University. And I graduated in 1948 from Yale University. He's in the White House, and I'm down here in the Florida swamps. I got some good story, good mileage out of that one.
Not everybody's as lucky as you were.
No. But this Terry Hallis, my radioman, he was 48 too, got out in 48 too. But I didn't see him too many times. Every once in a while I talked to him and all, but he was married by that time, and I still think him. And, so we didn't get together too much. But the three of us were on Yale 1948. But when you get close to graduation, you start looking for a job. Put out applications for a job. Had several offers. But went to work with International Paper Company at Camden, Arkansas, which was about 100 miles from my home, Monticello. Yes. Went into appraising timber on acquisition, which was buying land. You buy the internet. All the companies at that time were really buying up all the land they could for their mills. In acquisition, cruising, appraising, you tally all the trees, get all the how much big trees you got, how much small reproduction you got, how fast they're growing, what kind of soil you got. So you want to know about your land and your timber.
Did you travel a lot during that period?
All the time.
What period? What areas did you frequent?
This was went to work with them about the 1st of March of 48. As soon as I got out of it. Well, we worked around Arkansas. I never did stay in Hope from Clinton. Clinton was. He was about this high at that time, 1948. I think figure back, he was 2 or 3 years old. But passed through it 2 or 3 times. We stayed in 3 or 4 little towns around Arkansas. Nobody ever heard of Sheridan, Malvern, I don't know, don't forget. Nearly all of them. We stayed. They say Ashdown was another. They say, well, we got 5,000 acres here. We want to appraise. You send 2 crews, 2 men per crew, and send 2 crews, 4 men up there. You spend a couple weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks. And then they say, well, we got 10,000 over here. Go over here and get that.
But you stayed in Arkansas.
Yeah, right. Well, right then, and a big job came out in Trinity, Texas. Some lumber mill out there selling out 225,000 acres. And so they sent 2 of us, 2 crews from Arkansas, 2 crews from Louisiana, 2 crews from Florida, I think. We spent 2 months out there cruising that thing, and they'd walked you to death. We were doing a 1.25% cruise, which meant we counting the trees on 1.25% of the land. You took half an acre plots. On 40 acres, you take 2 half-acre plots, and the conversion factor on that 1.25 would be 80. When you tally your plots, and whatever amount of wood you got on there and all like that, you multiply by 80 to get the whole thing. Statistics. And so we nearly walked ourselves to death out there in July and August. And then back to Arkansas. Well, I decided I got tired of moving around like that. I've been moving around since 1941 when I got out of college. I don't know what, I hadn't spent more than 2 or 3 months in one place since 1941. This was 1948. Well, I spent some time up New Haven at Yale, but that didn't hardly count. way out of place up there. So I left the International Paper Company and went to a small sawmill out right close to Monticello. Buying timber for them, cruising timber, logging business. Of course, small outfit, underfinanced, as they say, and of course every little depression, it's a panic, you might say.
Yeah.
So, little depression, got laid off there, and so went back to International down at Spring Hill, Louisiana, in the woodlands department, on the land, managing their own property, and getting growing trees and getting them harvested, and all like that. So in, when was it? I think it's Christmas of 1950, I was home on vacation. Boss called up, says there's a job over in Florida you can have if you want it. So go over there and interview and you get it, have it. Well, you know, with the companies, you don't know whether they're trying to help you or try to get rid of you. But you don't dare turn down anything, because and then you're afraid you're stuck for the whole time. So I came over to Florida. It was in wood procurement, which is buying wood for the mills. They as they say, they got to log the mill. They got to get the wood into the mills. And at this time, came to Gainesville. We were based in Gainesville. And we covered the state from Tallahassee to Okeechobee. And what our job was to appraise these independent contractors that find tracts of timber. And they were operating on a shoestring, most of them. Find the tract of timber, we'd go in and appraise it. And if the guy could buy it at our appraisal, then he'd cut the timber and ship it to the mill. So it's kind of like a mortgage outfit in the housing business. But we had to check and see that he shipped it to the right mill every time and keep them going like that. Well, I got married in Gainesville, December 1951. So I still leave out of Gainesville on Monday morning, come back in on Friday afternoon.
Mm.
So that didn't go over too well. I requested to get back in management, get back on some land where you'd stay. But like I say, we covered the land from Tallahassee. I knew every road in the whole state of Florida then. Every little town, everything. You just didn't need a road map, just say go to Wimauma, you went to Wimauma. Bowling Green or anywhere. Sebring, Arcadia, Wauchula, Madison, Jasper, Lake City, Live Oak, any of them.
No.
Take off and go. Well, this is 1951, 1952. Florida didn't have all the roads they got now. And they didn't have all the motels they got now. And they didn't have all the new hotels they got now. So we stayed in some pretty dumpy places. Arcadia was one thing, Wauchula and others. Sometimes we stayed in a rooming house. But they say got married and that didn't set too well doing those. Got back into management.
Well, who did you marry now?
Married a girl from from Macon, Georgia, but she's been in Gainesville a few years, Ruth Tucker. She was secretary to the state administrator of Florida Home Administration, FHA, different FHA than the one you know about now, but this is Farmers Home Administration. So we got married there and requested to go back into management. They said, well, we can get you up to Jasper, Florida, which is right up on the north, right above Lake City, about right next to the Florida state line up there. Well, it's kind of a hard decision, but we moved up to Jasper, which is, according to my wife, at the end of the road. I think we lasted up there about a year. She was commuting to Valdosta State College, about 30 miles one way, and finally decided, well, we're not going to go much further with an international paper company. Let's go somewhere else. I didn't want to go back to Gainesville. I didn't particularly like Gainesville. Told her, said, well, I've covered the state from Tallahassee to Okeechobee. See, just about the whole state, now the whole business. The land is the best looking town. It's got a lot of timber business around there. Got Stetson University, you can finish college at Stetson. So we came on down to DeLand.
What did the town look like then?
Well, I don't know. You can start up here at 92 and say this been built since we've been here. What was here when we came here?
Yeah.
Well, those kind of things. So it has been not 100% turnover, but a whole lot of turnover. So, I fool around trying to do some work by myself in the timber business, never could get anything going. So I went to work with John F. McCallum, was a pulpwood dealer, shipping wood to International Paper Company and Hudson Pulp and Paper, and I don't know, he shipped pulpwood to 3 or 4 different mills around here.
Where was he getting the wood from?
Local owners. He had one man was cutting us here on Hudson Pulp and Paper Company, had a tract out here east of town. Bill Whitman was cutting for him out there. The setup is the mills have their dealers, and they're a prime contractor from the mill. You get an order every week, ship me so many cords of wood. They don't tell you where to get it, how to get it, what to pay for it, anything. So give me 150 cords of wood this week. So the dealer's job is to get out and find the wood, get somebody to cut it, load it on the railroad and ship it to the mill. Well, he had, Bill Whitman was cutting on company land out here, and the rest of it was coming off of private owned land. You had to find it, find who owned it, buy it, and get it cut and shipped. So I worked for him 2 or 3 years. I think pay was, I think when I first went to work with International out of Canton, right out of school, was $209 a month. Well, it come down from that $330 the Navy was paying me, plus all expenses. $209 at Camden. I think I went to work for John F. McCallum here in 1954 for $75 a week plus $100 a month, unaccounted for traveling expenses. So that's still less than that $330, I think. Well, I worked for him a couple of years or so, and one of those slumps hit. And I'll say it's easier to buy timber when on hard times, because most people count timber as kind of a bank reserve cash reserve there. They'll sell it when they need some money. Problem is, the mills don't need the wood in a slump time either, so you kind of there. But anyway, one of those slumps hit and got laid off there. By that time, I'd had a real estate license and was a real estate broker. So going to fool around with the real estate. And a little later, knowing most of the mill personnel, got hooked on with the mill at Pulaski, Hudson Pulp and Paper Company in Pulaski, shipping wood myself.
So what were the major mills around?
I'm prepared for that. There's 8 of them. They're not around here, but there's 8 mills. I've thought back and had to think of all of them. And at that time, according to government records, the Forest Service kept all kinds of records of production, how much wood was used. At that time, Volusia County was cutting about 60,000 cords of pulpwood a year. Just right at, it was just near the level for years, 60,000 cords.
And that's about the mid-50s you're talking about?
Yeah. And paper mills drawing wood from the land area in 1954. Hudson Pulp and Paper Company at Pulaski. That was the closest one. They later on were bought out by Georgia Pacific. Now it's known as Georgia Pacific Company. Yeah. Rainier Incorporated was at Fernandina Beach. Now they're not they're not a paper outfit. They're dissolving cellulose. I think Kodak was one of their big things, making photographic film and such as that. They never did convert it to paper. They used it before they got to paper. Container Corporation of America. That was at Fernandina Beach also. St. Regis Paper Company at Jacksonville. They later become, there was an outfit named Smurth. I don't know who they were, bought them out. Then it's now Stone Container Corporation. International Paper Company at Panama City. St. Mary's Craft at St. Mary's, Georgia. Now they're known as Gilman Paper Company. Owens, Illinois Paper at Jacksonville. And let's see, that was Owens, Illinois glass outfit, I believe. Union Bag at Savannah, Georgia. And then later merged with Camp Corporation. They're now known as Union Camp Corporation. And they say they produced about 60,000 cords a year there. Most of these people had dealers like John F. McCallum established around. One of the big dealers in this area was Ed Peck in Gainesville, Florida. He was a pretty big dealer. You might know him now as Edwin W. Peck of Daytona Beach Shores, a builder over there, built all the condominiums.
Condominium builder, yeah.
But he was a pulpwood dealer in Gainesville when I first came here. But they locate these dealers around, and one man might cover half the state, man, as far as that goes. He put workers here and there and all like that. So,
do you have an idea where the wood was coming from in Volusia County? What areas of the county the wood was coming from?
well, let's see. Hudson Pulp and Paper Company had their land out here, 21,112 acres.
In the northwest part of the county? Or?
Right out here on 92, between here and Tiger Bay, right west of there, east of the airport. I talked to Lee Powers, another forester here in town. I said, how do you know it's 21,112 acres? He said, well, I was in charge of it. I built the roads out there and all like that, planted the trees. And I said, well, how many trees you plant out there while you was out there? He's out there 3 or 4 years. He said, I don't know, we planted a bunch of them. I said, about 1 million? He said, oh, well, that's pretty close. So, So they were, that was a closed corporation, though. With John F. McCallum had exclusive rights out there, you might say. At one time, J.C. Vining was the district forester out there, and they had a Mr. Beach who was the foreman in charge of everything. Union Camp Corporation had about 60,000 acres up around Pearson up there. They was cutting on, shipping to Savannah. Ed Peck, I think, was cutting all that wood. The fellow from sawmill man Carl Bryce from Archer had put that deal together, and it was the old Ray Bond tract, they called it, Conrad tract. Put it together in Union Bag at the time, bought it there. Ken James was the district forester on it, and they planted millions of trees up there. They were really planted a whole lot of trees up there. Tomoka Land Company over here at Daytona Beach, they had 20 to 25,000 acres. Clayton Clark was their man over there. Gene Daniels was their field man. They had originally were a turpentine outfit, naval stores, and they had a turpentine still on their property over there, and that's the one they moved up to the Barberville there. And of course, turpentine was a different story. Back in World War I, II, and all the Depression years, you couldn't sell trees hardly, lumber, timber, but there was a market for turpentine, the raw gum, you might say. So that was a big business around here before World War II. And I don't know, you talk to them, they had 10,000 faces laid a crop. That's where they scraped the tree, drained the gum down in the cup. And you weren't hardly in the business unless you had 10 or 12 crops, which was 80 to 120,000 trees tapped. And that's one of those jobs that you existed on, but that's about all. Colored blacks worked that. But it kept the economy going when nothing else was going on.
Was that the largest industry in the county at the time?
I don't know. I guess oranges, citrus was a little better, but it was a close race.
It's right there with citrus.
Yeah, at that time. I don't know what citrus was bringing back before the war, before my time, but like I say, all the flatwoods, they had a turpentine operation. You couldn't sell the land, but they'd pay you for tapping the trees to get the turpentine. So I think we had some turpentine trees on some land up in Jasper, leased out. Seemed like it was 10 cents a face for the tree. And if you had 10,000 of them, what is that, $100 for $1,000 for the crop. So if you had 10 crops, you had $10,000 worth of income. But at the same time, you couldn't sell the trees till they got through tapping for turpentine. Most of the time, they worked the trees 3 years. It was a normal span to work the trees. So you had to plan ahead a little on that. If you leased out your turpentine rights, you had to wait 3 years before you could do anything in there.
And what happened to the land after they cleared it?
Well, the timber companies replanted.
They replanted?
Yeah. And see, that's one of your gripes about the timber business. People understand annual crops. You can grow a crop of corn, go in there and harvest it, level the ground off, right down to the bare soil, no good sand or soil there. Plant next spring, plant another crop, harvest it the fall, but they can't understand harvesting timber at 30-year intervals. You wait 30 years, cut every tree in there, harvest the timber, and people have a fit. Regardless whether the paper companies come back in and replant or not, for a while, it looks bad. Of course, when you're building a house, it looks bad before you get it finished too. A lot of scrap laying around, and trash and everything else. They cut the trees, prepare the soil most of the time, get rid of the brush and go in there and plant. Well, it takes about 5 years for those seedlings to get up above the brush and the grass to begin to show that there's something there. So people got 5 years to fuss and fume and say, boy, those companies are ready to do it. Bad. But Smoke and Land Company now. Miami Corporation down here around Osteen from Maytown, they own 60,000, more or less 60,000 acres of land. And there's no telling how many seedlings they planted. They planted millions and millions of them. There's no comprehension with the public how many pine trees have been planted in the state. The state nursery up there, best I remember, their capacity was 50 million. They were harvesting 50 million seedlings a year to be planted over the state. Plus the paper companies have nurseries of their own. So I don't know exactly what the status is now, but several years there, nearly 100 million trees a year were being planted in the state of Florida. Nobody knew about it. Eugene Bill Smedberg was a forester down at Miami Corporation. He died on the operating table in one of the first bypass operations in this part of the state at that time. Died pretty young. Earl Underhill is the present forester down there. Eugene O'Reilly over at Samsula, he had about 20,000 acres leased to St. Regis Paper Company. They didn't buy the land, they bought the growth of the timber for the next 20 or 25 years through cutting it. So a long-term lease. Other landowners, Grover Lafeast, he had 2,000 or 3,000, I think. Nolan Ford had some. The Leffler family had about 4,000 or 5,000 acres down around Lake Ashby, well, right west of Lake Ashby. Roe Taylor Corporation had between here and Daytona about 15,000, 20,000 acres between 92 and 44, but most of it low land over there. The Strong family up at De Leon Springs had some virgin pine up there, about like some on this picture here. They hardly ever cut it, but they do it. There was a tract named Mary Farms up at Volusia, about 5,000 acres. The Bryant brothers had 8,000 or 10,000 acres right out here east of town, north of 44. A.C.M. Anderson had 2,000 or 3,000 acres up at Pearson. F.M. Ford had 8,000 acres out here in Deltona. He was the basis of the Deltona buyout. He was the core purchase that Deltona made, 8,000 acres. And when they got his, they started filling in. Tom Stewart family had what, 2,000 or 3,000 acres that Arvina's got now, talking about developing. Until Tom Jr. made him some money. Of course, I made myself some money. Made his land look real good. We went in there and thinned from underneath. We thinned out all the small pines instead of taking the big ones. Took all the small pines out and left all the big ones about the same size. When we got through, you couldn't tell anything had been cut, and he'd been selling that land at a good clip since. One place where the timber cutting really helped beautify the land instead of making it look pretty. So, but buying timber then, myself, I never had a contract with any company. All mine was open market purchase. And I covered about 5 counties: Volusia County, Seminole, Orange, Lake, and Mary. I couldn't go north too much because Hudson was up there, and Lewis Wadsworth up at Bunnell was a big producer, and so he had Bunnell, Flagler County pretty well covered. But at that time, all you could do is drive around, spot some timber, try to find out who owned it, try to find the owner, and see if he'd buy it, see if he'd sell it. So if you bought it, as a dealer, I never did try to get large. I did all my own work. It's one of those things, you know, in a business, you can do so much yourself. You think, well, I'll get another personnel and would do more. Well, most of the time it seems like if you get another operator, you got to triple your business instead of double it to keep going. So I did all my own work. When you bought the timber, first thing you had to do is locate it on the ground. I mean, mark the line, boundary lines of it, with flagging or something, or blazing. Yeah. Then you took your operator, your subcontractor out there to show him the timber, to get him to agree to cut it for the price you could pay for it. Years ago, you didn't have to worry about that. Everybody was in the timber cutting bed, and they cut whatever you put them on. Just take them out there. Here, cut this. Well, as things progressed, he began to get, oh, I don't know what to say, independent. But if you bought any kind of questionable stuff, too thin, too small, too wet, you better take your man out there first and show him to it and say, if I buy this, will you cut it at a certain price? If he said yes, I'll do it at that price. Well, you're pretty safe. But if he kind of ducked around, looked around, kicked the ground 2 or 3 times, you better not buy that thing because he wasn't going to cut it. So
You had to be a good businessman, didn't you?
yeah,
To make money, you were talking about.
well, you got to know your timber first, because you can go broke paying too much for timber. You got to buy it. I never did try to steal any price-wise. I paid them up what I thought was a fair price, and it was a market price, and I stayed in business all the time. But you got to know for sure you're going to get your money back when you. There's 2 ways of buying timber. One of them by the piece, by the cord. You tell the guy, well, you got about 150 cords out here, $5 a cord. That's, let's say, $150 right here in this little spot. Now I can pay you $5 a cord. We cut it, we ship it to the mill. When we get the scale ticket back from the mill, I'll pay you the $5 a cord for how much wood we ship to the mill. Or you can go out there and you walk around there and you say, well, it looks like there's 150 cords here, and $150 worth of timber. He'd say, the man says, I want the cash in my hand right now. You say, well, looks like $750 worth of timber. So you pay him $750, you send the men out there and cut it. And you better know whether you got $750 worth of timber out there or not when you start. Of course, sometimes you talking about $5,000 worth of timber or something other like that. So it was the owner had two options. Either take my word how much timber we was cutting and hauling, or take my check and let me see how much I can get for your wood, out of your wood. So
That's where you have the advantage then if you know timber, right?
Yeah, to a certain extent, like I say, but there's opposition. You know, other people looking at timber too, and you can't.
Competition. Right?
Yeah, you can't go out there and buy it half price. You got to pay a pretty full market price for it.
Yeah.
But like I say, you got to know the timber, appraise it, all like that. And on top of that, you got to know your cutter, your man that's going to do the logging. Some of those guys wouldn't get their feet wet. You better not buy any trees in the water. Others would wade out knee deep to get to a tree.
Mm.
So you got to know who's going to cut it. That sand pine scrub down at Deltona now, it was so thick and heavy, and boy, it was hot in there in the summertime. You couldn't get a breath of air. And you couldn't hardly get anybody to cut down there. And then most of the time you wanted to cut in the summertime because other places would be flooded out and that would be nice and dry down there to work anyway. There was two brothers around here, Woolard brothers. And for some reason they liked that scrub out there. And they'd get 3 times as much wood off of 40 acres of land as some other crew would. So you just got to know your cutters. And one of these stories, somebody say, well, what's the price of wood? What do you pay for wood? I said, well, it all depends. I said, if you got about 3 or 4 months supply bought up ahead, and you're okay, you don't pay too much. But if you got a couple of logging crews parked out at the side curb out there and say, well, we're going to work today, you get out and pay a little more for it to get them a place to work. Well, at that time, most of the pulpwood, which was mostly what I did, this was, like I say, in early 50s, it was all second growth. It wasn't too much. And but when I did find a tract with saw logs on it, big stuff, I usually worked with a C.D. Braddock. Connie Braddock was a logger. He'd tell me what pulpwood he had, and I'd sell him the saw logs.
Explain the difference in between the pulp and the saw logs.
Pulpwood is the small trees. It's kind of like the difference between hamburger and T-bone steak. You can make pulpwood out of big trees, but you can sell them on the stump about 3 or 4 times as much money as you can sell small trees for pulpwood. So your pulpwood, your small tree is not big enough to make logs, lumber. Goes to the pulp mill at one price. They get up about 12 inches in diameter and they become logs then. They go to the sawmill. But at that time, more or less going rate was about $5 a cord for pulpwood and $20 a thousand board feet for saw logs. Well, you got not quite 3 cords in 1,000 feet of lumber. In other words, you get $20 for a tree and